Welcome to the very best part of my broadcast week. I can't tell you how excited I am to do this show. First of all, we're in New York City. The Lambs Club is the great vibe you feel and hear around us, Midtown Manhattan. Our special guest, he's been on the show before. But when we did that show, it was mid-March of 2021. Try to remember what we were living through then. The pandemic was just beginning to rage all across the country and everything was shutting down. And we had a conversation then about comedy, about anxiety, about depression, about all the adaptations we were going through. We were such babies then. At one point of the show, I said, we'll be back in restaurants in a couple of weeks or maybe a month or so. It was like a year and a half, folks. I'll never forget that show because not only was it great and in terms of content, but it allowed me to forge a relationship with someone who I have kind of gotten to know. He's probably less happy about that than I am, but we'll find out.
Stop.
Gary Gulman is our special guest.
Thank you for having me. And
Gary, it's great to see you in person.
Yes.
We pledged we would do this on
really
that show.
special.
We said, we're going to try to connect. We're going to try to find each other. And here we have. It's taken a while. A while.
Yeah, I'm very grateful. And it feels like a day ago, but also 10 years ago in many ways. It's very confusing to the brain.
So the reason we're in New York, we came up especially to do this show with Gary. He's an engine of comedic brilliance and genius. Two parts of that engine right now, a new book called Misfit and a brand new HBO special debuting this week, Born on Third Base. Congratulations on both.
Thank you. This was a great year.
A good year.
Yeah,
How are you doing?
I feel terrific. I really do. This is the longest I've gone in my life without an episode of depression interfering with my life and my work. So I'm incredibly grateful and always vigilant, but I feel more relaxed about the endurance and how long I can expect to feel good.
And that must feel like a genuine heaven-sent or nearly heaven-sent gift.
Yes. I always used to say if I didn't have this ailment, I would be capable of much more. I would be able to stick to a schedule and do things, but I would find that I would have 6 months of productivity and then be undone for a 3 to 6 month, or sometimes in the last case 2.5 year bout of depression. And then the issue with that is you get back to work, but you're so behind on so many things, including your life, and wanting to enjoy your life for a little while, and then saying, I have to say write a new hour of comedy, or I've always wanted to write a book, and I was unable to commit to the 3 years that a book can take, because I didn't know if I would have 3 years of uninterrupted productivity and creativity and I guess mental well-being. And so I'm just so grateful. It took about 3 years, but I also had that pandemic year where I didn't have to do anything else except work on my book and exercise a little bit. So that was a silver lining. There were really no blessings from the pandemic except that.
Not really.
Yeah. We
except
had
that
a little bit more
connectedness that we
free
talked
time.
about in that show.
Yeah.
Talk to your friends, open up to your family.
Yes.
We all got a chance to do that, and then I think we all got tired of that after about a couple of months.
I know.
Too much sharing.
Yeah.
A lot of oversharing. The era of oversharing.
Yeah, it really was something.
I want to ask you about your wife, because we talked to you about your family back in March of 2021. You write about her lovingly in the book. Tell me a little bit about your wife and how crucial she has been to all of this arc of perseverance and now this great run of success.
And
peace.
I love that question. People don't ask that enough, because a depression is kind of a family illness.
Family affair.
Like a lot of illnesses, but
I know
it can be really trying, and so the interesting thing is we were only together for about 6 months.
I read that.
Yeah, when I fell apart, and she never wavered, and I would say, "Why are you sticking around? You can get out." It would
From
be
the book you said
understandable.
leave.
Yes, I said
Save yourself. The ship
Yeah.
is sinking.
Right? Yeah, and she refused, and it was hard for me to really internalize this at the time. But she loved me, and she enjoyed my company, even though I was catatonic frequently, and really, I I was never negative in expressing myself as though I'm dying or anything like that, and so maybe that was helpful. I was a good patient. I kept trying to get better,
Right,
and I followed doctor's orders, and so that was probably part of it. But also, she just had so much strength, and anyone I talk to who has been a partner of somebody with depression or anxiety has reinforced that idea of how special my wife is and what she was. She's a real warrior, as the young people say, a ride or die.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm making Audrey grimace. But yeah, I'm
Special associate producer for this episode, Audrey.
I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to my wife, and I express that so frequently. And we as a team are so grateful that I got better, because it's opened up this really exciting period in my life where we're getting to do a lot of things, and we're able to vacation without worrying that depression or anxiety could mute the excitement and the enjoyment. So it's just been I've been just so grateful.
And that reference to warrior reminds me of something you talked about in that episode we did back in March of 2021. Carrie Fisher writing in her book about mental illness. We need to give people who are suffering and who work through this more credit because they have a warrior mentality. They are trying to get better.
Yeah.
And you need a warrior alongside you.
Yes. No, that's so true. That's so true. I mean, you
it's
can
hard.
do it on your own, but it's so helpful to have somebody. I mean, my wife would go with me to every psychiatry appointment and do research and ask questions. And at one point, she illegally grew psilocybin mushrooms, because she had read a study about the effects of psilocybin mushrooms. And there's actually a book by Michael Pollan where he goes into it, and it's actually much further along in testing and usage. And she tried to get me into a program where they were experimenting with it, and I wasn't eligible. And then she said, all right, I'll just grow them in our house.
And it's all good. The statute of limitations long since passed. It's all good. All good. People don't worry.
Oh my gosh. I'm admitting a
the
felony.
DEA hardly ever listens to this show. Hardly ever.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That's so good.
I'm sure there are many factors, but for those who are gleeful to hear the bounce in your voice, the 3-year run, to what would you attribute this space?
It's actually
and time?
a 6-year run.
6-year run, okay.
Yeah. What would I attribute to? I mean,
a lot of things, I'm sure.
A lot of things. I mean, one thing that I had never tried before and was dramatically helpful was inpatient psychiatric ward at Weill Cornell, New York Presbyterian, and also a treatment within that, which was electroconvulsive therapy, which is that thing that everybody's afraid of, but is
from one movie.
Yeah, from one movie, but it's like the gold standard of treatment-resistant depression, which is what I had. I had a 2.5-year bout that didn't react, that didn't want to participate in medication or a lot of other interventions, but once the electroconvulsive therapy sort of rebooted or reset my system, medicine worked, and so
pathways were reopened.
Yeah, the pathways were reopened, and that's a great way to put it. And so the medication works. The other thing was, once you get to a level where you have a little bit of energy and a little bit of hope, you're able to exercise, you're able to spend time with friends, you're able to do your work and get out of the house, and that just builds on it. And so those are a lot of the things that I've been able to do to maintain and really even strengthen it, because I've been out of depression a lot over the years. I mean, 6-9 months at a time, but there was always a fear that it would recur, and also I don't want to chance it by trying to get even better by adjusting my medication or adding a new medication or something like that, and so that has really been. I mean, I keep saying grateful all the time, but that's become
the word.
My refrain.
You can't overuse it. You
Yeah.
can't overuse it. That's the voice of Gary Gulman. Lamb's Club in Midtown Manhattan is our host restaurant. Stay tuned for segment two of the Takeout in just 1 second.
The only person I will accept typing up your act and binding it and selling it to us is Jesus.
Welcome back. Continuing our conversation with Gary Gulman here at the Lambs Club, Midtown Manhattan. So happy to be doing the show. So happy to see Gary in person. Misfit, the book, is about you.
Yes.
It's about your life. I'm about halfway through it, but I came across something, probably the only thing that we actually share, a childhood drama that circulates around a library book.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah. You lost one and I lost one. You had a family drama. I had a family drama. You haven't checked out a book since. If I read the book correctly, I haven't checked a book out since.
Wow.
Yes.
No, I never checked out a book from the library at school again. I had a really good relationship with the librarians at the Linfield Public Library in Linfield, Mass. And
who did not know of the previous scandal.
Yes. Luckily, they weren't an interconnected universe.
There were no listservs back then.
Yeah, so I lost a
no
book.
No APBs out on Gary Gulman, age 7.
Yeah, you'll have to. Well, I'll just explain. In the book, I'm forced to repeat first grade because my father has an idea that was also just traumatic and wrecked my enjoyment of school. And I don't know why I feel the need to say this at 53 years old, but it wasn't because I wasn't a good student. I was in the top reading group, which was called Sun Up. I was a good reader. I was good at math. My father felt that I would have an advantage in sports, and for some reason felt I could have been more mature to go into second grade, which.
And you'd be big, and all the kids would be afraid of you.
Yeah, it was just
all these advantages stacking up.
It was lunacy. So in the second run through first grade, I lost this library book, and the librarian and the teacher sort of teamed up to get it back, and held me after school until it was returned, and it just. It was such a debacle and brought so much misery and ruined school for me, as well as the school library.
Happy ending. You found the book. I never found.
Oh, really?
No.
What was the name of your book?
I can't remember the name of it.
Okay.
I just remember it had a cartoon of a dog on the cover that looked a lot like my dog. It was like a collie. And that's why I checked the book out.
Yeah, of course.
Because the dog looked like my dog, Ruffy. And I don't know what happened to the book. For all of my life, I have no idea what happened to this book. But it was a family scandal. My dad was furious. My mother was furious.
My mother was very upset.
A very new kind of library back. It's not a thing that you would understand now, most of you listening to this. But when they put library books for school kids in a van, a mobile library, they would drive it around your neighborhood.
Yes.
It was a
The
really
bookmobile.
special, bookmobile, really special thing. I checked it out from the bookmobile, so it was like a double offense. Like I was metaphorically urinating on this brand new innovation that was so wonderful to spread literature to children all over the neighborhood, and I was disrespecting it. And it was a very big deal, and I've never found the book. I've never forgotten about it, and I've never checked a book out from a public library since. I buy all my books, which also is my way of thanking authors for writing them. Having written books myself, buy them. That's much better.
At a point,
I get a little scratch out of it that way, see?
One of the points I got to financially was the financial comfortability to buy books rather than get them at the library. And I was a library guy for a long time, but I came across, and it was probably on Goodreads, a sentence that said, a book good enough to read is good enough to own, or something like that. And I buy books, and I just the idea going into writing the book was that I had to do justice and service to this art form that has brought me endless joy and company and relief from loneliness over the years. So I took it very seriously, and I didn't want to just type up my act. I had been burned by that before. I don't know if you remember the guy who played Jerry on Seinfeld, but that's from my new special. But he put out a book.
Who was that?
Jerry Seinfeld.
Who was that guy?
Yeah, he put out a book in 1993, and I bought it. And I was a library guy, but I felt I need to own a book by a great comedian. And it was just his act typed up, and I was outraged. I was outraged.
That was a sick burn on you.
It was
really bad.
It really was. The only person I will accept typing up your act and binding it and selling it to us is Jesus. That is the only. Otherwise, you write your own book.
Right, exactly.
And yeah.
And there's one more of him than there is Jews in the National Hockey League Hall of Fame.
That is right. That is right. It is more likely to be the Messiah than to be a Jew in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Wow.
That's also from the special.
Thank you for watching the special. My word.
Not once, but twice.
Twice.
Yes.
That makes me so happy.
It's
got rewatchability.
Yes. I skate, to extend the metaphor ever so briefly, dangerously close to fanboying and slobbering all over you. So
man.
I'm holding myself in emotionally at a very tense level.
I'm really happy to hear that. I sensed it, but it's nice to hear it confirmed.
It's oozing out of every pore of my body. Thank you, Audrey. Thank you. It's always good to get a joke, to get a laugh out of Audrey. What is it about, because I read this in the book, Misfit, you were a class clown. When did you know? When did you start being a class clown? Were you first a class clown for your mother?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
No, that's a good way to put it. It was in a documentary about Kurt Vonnegut, and he said it so beautifully. He said the youngest child is always the family comedian. Mm-hmm. And I felt that way. It's this great way to get attention.
Yep.
And in a family like mine, where comedy and laughter was really valued, it was a
way to cope.
Yes, totally. It was.
And your siblings are older than you, right?
Yeah, much older by 10 and 13 years. So
Right.
it was almost like a separate family, but I could get attention from them, and they were actually incredibly generous in terms of bringing me around with their friends, and it was probably because I was kind of entertaining and a good mascot. I think a friend of mine was just telling me that was. That or maybe somebody did a one-person show called The Mascot, in which they were saying that certain people become the mascot for their family.
Sure, yeah, right.
And it's a way to cope and provide certain skills and values to a family. Yeah.
And as I read in the book, obviously you're doing this material for your brothers who are older. Your mother's obviously older. So your drollery didn't really work for your contemporaries. They didn't get it at all.
No, they didn't.
The room, you were past the room already.
I wasn't able to play.
The room.
Yes, I wasn't able to play to the younger crowd. I was appealing to the high school grads, and I would get good laughs from the kids in my neighborhood who were 4 or 5 years older than me,
right.
and I was embraced by them, and that was very helpful. But then, the first time through first grade, I didn't really. Yeah. I didn't.
Sandy, Duncan, Marcus Welby, it just doesn't roll.
That was the second time through first grade, and then into fourth grade. I remember making these references that were for teenagers and adults, and the first graders weren't into it. And also that style of humor wasn't for them. They were still on Duty and Pee-Pee,
right?
And I had moved on.
Yeah, but you'll return to it if you're desperate,
right? Yeah.
You can always go back to that
The thing is that I wanted to be working my family and their friends, and so that their laughter was harder to get. I think I like to challenge, and also in the second time through first grade, it was just that's a big year. 1 year from first to second is really big, and so these kids who were just starting first grade were very different from me.
Right.
And I didn't really connect with them. It was something.
But you persevered. You made it through.
I did persevere, but there for years, even after school, there was a pit in my stomach every Sunday night of going back to school.
On Monday.
Yeah.
That's a real thing.
Yeah, and I remember it was the 60 Minutes. That just it was like Pavlov. That was my Pavlov's bell.
That was like, it's coming.
Yeah, and it would make me just
when we come back,
arrest my joy.
I also want to thank the Lambs Club as our host restaurant here in Midtown Manhattan. When we come back, we're going to talk about not only school-age anxieties and other things like that, but when you first went on stage and what you remember from that. I Major Garrett. Gary Gulman is our special guest. Back
we'll
in
be
just
right
1
back.
second. Yeah, there we go.
I think that's part of the aim of doing stand-up is to try to give a little piece of yourself and make yourself a little bit a little bit vulnerable.
Welcome back to the Takeout. Gary Gulman is our special guest here at the Lambs Club, Midtown Manhattan. Do you remember the first time you went up on stage, to be, you're not playing the living room? You're
October 11th, 1993, at Nick's Comedy Stop in Boston.
It's a misty memory, isn't it? You have no recollection, really. Shrouded.
The memory is murky. No, I remember every moment of it, and it went well enough that I thought, I have a knack for this.
Okay.
I have a lot of work to do.
Mm-hmm.
I also had a healthy level of delusion where it's like,
necessary.
no, I'm going to be...
You got to have it. You got to have it. You got to have it.
Absolutely.
There is a fine line, ladies and gentlemen, between bravery and stupidity. There really is. That's not a joke.
No. It's really remarkable.
Because you are braver when you are not sure of what you're getting into. It's a fact.
Yeah. That's really helpful advice. I was reminded of that recently, and it's just it makes watching your early self a little cringeworthy.
Sure.
And you think, where did I have the gumption to do this when I was incompetent?
Right.
And yet look how confident I am in this crap. Oh man. So yeah, I went up with a
now
with
we
unearned
should pause here
confidence.
just for a second. For the women who might be listening to this show, they would say, no, that's a male affliction.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
All guys think that they're better than they
That's
are.
possible. That's possible.
In all walks of life.
Yeah, but for some reason it didn't feel that way in a lot of other things. I was always very trepidatious in
So let me
joining
ask you,
new
before
things.
you went up on that stage, did you have a conversation with yourself about what this was supposed to be, what you were doing? Because I think it's a monumental step to go from not on stage to on stage. I think that's the longest journey in life.
Yes.
For someone who's
I
trying
say
to be
that
a
to
comedian.
people who've started things like that. I say the hardest part is over. Going from not doing it to doing it, that's the hardest part. And then the second hardest part is every day.
Just doing
it. Yeah. Until, I mean, what kept me going was that I loved it. I had a really good time doing it. And I just had real respect for the art form and so wanted to get better and knew what it took to get better and it wasn't as clear back then because there weren't comedians discussing it in podcasts and things like that, and there weren't schools for it, but there were enough stories of people saying and I mean, as much as I make fun of Seinfeld, he made it clear that you have to write a lot, and you have to do it a lot, and you have to get on stage a lot.
And you have to cross things out.
Yeah, and you have to cross things out. So that was really helpful. And then I would just I was good about reading things on writing and performing, and there were a handful of books that you could read that you would get maybe a nugget of great information or advice. And so I was really good at that. But the main thing was just to never quit, or make the times when you do quit last less than the rest of your life, because there were times where I can never do this again.
No, exactly.
After a bad show, and then somebody calls, do you want to do a show? Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
What is the definition of a bad show?
I think it's when you... That's a great question. I guess, of course, there would be not a lot of laughs.
Right.
But that's going to happen.
But the night before, you're working the same material in a different city, and there are laughs.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're...
Yeah. And so I'm going to direct this towards people who are still at that point where a bad show can derail them. And it's that you should not let the audience or the circumstances take away your self-esteem and your feeling that, I enjoy doing this. Whether they laugh or not is not always in your control, but you can do your best and commit. And it's the other thing is it's also okay to acknowledge that you're not comfortable or doing well. I mean, that's incredibly vulnerable, and I think that's part of the aim of doing stand-up, is to try to give a little piece of yourself and make yourself a little bit vulnerable, and more vulnerable if you can. The audience really connects with that and appreciates that.
Do you still find that to be true?
Yes, and it's interesting what your definition of vulnerable, how it changes over the years. I really believe when I first started, it was vulnerable for me to just share things that I thought were funny with an audience. And then in 2019, it was, I'm going to tell everyone with an HBO subscription how I recovered from a debilitating, crippling case of depression in 2017. And then in the latest special, I think the most vulnerable thing I ever said on stage was that I was 53 years old and my net worth was $89,000. And that I
climbing. Okay.
But I rented rather than owned.
Yeah.
And people will probably go online and check.
Two-slicer.
Because
it's a two-slicer, not a four-slicer.
Yeah,
You'll get it when you watch it.
That's one of my favorite moments because I improvised that on stage because I for some reason I sensed that the people were not that they didn't feel bad enough for me because of my toaster doesn't fit on the counter, and they were thinking that it was a four-slicer, which it's the yacht of toasters. Of course it's not going to fit on a kitchen counter, but I can't fit a two-slicer and the coffee maker.
Right.
And we discussed
coffee
earlier today.
Yes.
I wish I could have given coffee a credit in my special and an acknowledgement in my book because it provides me with a personality and frequently
and a longevity and
the confidence of a superhero. Yeah.
No doubt. I don't want to dwell on this, but I do want to note it because you raised it in the book, Misfit. Yes, your depression was debilitating. It was deep, but you write in the book, you thought about cutting yourself. You were really, really down.
Yeah.
Down.
Yeah.
And I want people to hear that, not because I want to dwell on it, but because I want to hear your voice say, yeah, I was there.
Yes.
I saw that place.
Yes. And
I'm not there anymore.
Right. I was suicidal and had plans and ideas and some half-hearted attempts, or a half-hearted attempt in which it's interesting that the toaster comes into play again. We had gotten this new toaster, the two-slicer, and at one point at my wit's end, I don't know why I thought this would work, but I took the plastic bag that the toaster came in and I put it over my head, and then as I'm doing it, my head emerged from the other side of the plastic sleeve. It's a sleeve, and I mean you had to laugh.
It's the darkest humor I think I've ever come across in the book.
It's so true, and
it's horrible, but it's hilarious.
Horrible, but it is hilarious, and I didn't know how people would take it, but I remember in the book I said it was the shortest sentence in the book, which was funny. Period. And yeah, I had never told anybody that until I, in effect, told my editor, author. That was oh my gosh, that made it sound like my editor wrote my book. And if there's any way to take that away, because I need credit. And I don't want people to think that I had a ghostwriter. But when I told my editor through the pages that I wrote. That I had, and
that Gary Gulman wrote, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, that I was expecting.
Capital G-A-R-Y.
I was expecting him to say, "Well, that's too dark," but he thought it was a really interesting way to start the book and let people know where I was when I moved back home to my mother to convalesce.
Right.
Yeah.
And to begin this therapeutic journey, which, to go back to where we started, is in a really great place.
Yes.
And I want people to hear this who might be at some other place on this journey to know through you it's possible. It's real.
No, completely. And I mean, people have been lower, but I remember being in the hospital thinking I'm as low as a lot of these people, and so I belong here. It wasn't a case where it was on the margins. I really needed that, and my only regret is that I took so long to take that step, which was, and it was fear. I was afraid of it, and I had been sort of propagandized by a movie
Sure.
that came out in the 70s.
Right.
And
Against it, to be fearful of it.
To be fearful of the hospital and that particular treatment, the electroconvulsive therapy.
That's the voice of Gary Gulman. Stay tuned for segment 4 of the Takeout in just 1 second.
The hard thing to do with comedy when you're trying to make a point is that sometimes it doesn't get laughs, it gets claps.
Welcome back to the Takeout. Gary Gulman is our special guest. Again, our thanks to the Lambs Club here in Midtown Manhattan. Great vibe. We're just having coffee and water. We're sort of gutting it out, not doing the whole luncheon thing here. Gary's just off the basketball court, for goodness sake.
I really am.
He can't get a big calorie overload right now. So we're going to be respectful of that. I want to talk a little bit about the HBO special if we can.
Yes,
just a
no,
couple
I'd
of
love
things. You talk about your childhood, not only in the sense of normal things that make you nervous or anxious as a child, but among your contemporaries, you were poor.
Yes.
And you talk in great detail about the sharpness with which poor children develop a sense of the world around them and have a much better sense of money and finances than better off kids. And you also talk about initiative.
Oh, yeah.
And the misplaced concern about the initiative of those who are impoverished.
Yes.
Please carry on with that.
Yes, I mean, it's ironic that I'm being stared down on by Ronald Reagan, who sort of mainstreamed that idea that came from Barry Goldwater, who was such an astute politician that his bumper stickers said, "Vote Barry AUH2O." He was going for a Southern strategy by appealing to people who were familiar with the periodic table of the elements and their combinations. I mean, just such a silly man. But he was the person who sort of popularized this idea that welfare was strangling America, and also, and this was very helpful in changing people's minds toward the safety net that LBJ and Truman and even Eisenhower and of course FDR, but that the welfare wasn't working, and it was ruining the initiative and of the poor, and they were becoming, as Goldwater put it, dependent creatures, which is like a picture of a monster.
Right.
And I wanted to get this across in my special, and I just happened to come across it in a sentence when I was writing, and I think, oh, let's try this. And the hard thing to do with comedy when you're trying to make a point is that sometimes it doesn't get laughs, it gets claps, and I think Seth Meyers called it clapter. And it really bums me out because it's like I didn't go into this to be a cheerleader or
a
rallying a preacher or anything like that. I want to get laughs, and I was finally able, through a use of a comedy formula. It's not really a formula; it's just a irony.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I said, the people said they would say, welfare doesn't work. It makes the people dependent and lose their initiative. And I said, oh, well, thank you for looking out for my initiative, my precious initiative.
And your character,
yes.
Yeah,
and my character. My fear was, my only fear now is that you're going to take this extra money that you're able to keep by not helping out the poor and children by leaving it to your children in the form of a trust fund, which trust fund is this very expensive way to tell your children you don't believe in them. Trust fund is short for trust me, you're a loser, and so my fear is that your children are going to become dependent on this trust fund and lose their initiative. and that was the final way I was able to put it. And I remember it's always great to hear from a colleague that what you're saying works. And I remember Michael Che was sitting in the back when I said that for the first time, and he said something to the effect of, "I always wanted to be able to get that point across, and you really did it." And I was really grateful for him. He's just a wonderful thinker and performer, and that was really nice when a colleague appreciates your work.
No doubt.
Yeah.
And one thing you talk about in the special Born on Third Base is you're a product of the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
Income inequality was real then, but it's far, far more out of whack now.
Yeah.
And that creates all sorts of societal tensions and pressures and a sense of distance between ourselves.
Yes.
That's a really big issue. It's a big deal.
Yeah. I mean, there have been studies, and I'm sure there are studies to cover everything, but I feel this kind of resonated, that people who are insulated by, I mean, and I'm not talking millionaires, I'm talking billionaires and 200 millionaires. I've heard 40 million is plenty.
I'd like to try and find out.
Yeah, I would love to try 40 million. I wonder if I would still think for a moment when the ATM says there's a $3 fee. Do you want to continue? Like, I see that $3 fee. I'm like, that seems like a lot of money.
Yeah.
Maybe I should take out more so it's not a bigger percentage.
Exactly.
So it's a lesser percentage.
I'm always on the fence about that fee.
If I'm taking out $20.
Right, for $3? That's like Gazzo.
Yeah.
Rocky reference.
Well, yes,
also
a great
special.
Rocky reference. My word. So anyhow, I find the income inequality, and again, I feel like that Jerry Seinfeld has become a scapegoat in this special, but
figure.
But I feel like he's in my business ostensibly, and he's worth $1 billion, and I'm like, is he that much better than me? If at all, is he better? Is he $999,911,000 better than me? That's
how we got to the $89,000, folks. Full circle. Everything is full circle. How much do you love the show Shark Tank?
Oh, I despise it. I think it is a despicable display, and I can't get over how many people find it so compelling that it's on just about all the time.
Yes.
It runs for episode after episode after episode, and it is another example of this income inequality where it is so vast, and also just the lack of empathy that billionaires feel it's okay to force entrepreneurs to essentially dance for a small investment in their life's dream, this thing they've put everything into. And yes, there are success stories of Spanx, and I can't think of any other, but most of these people are just humiliated or derided by these people who aren't that much, that I don't think they're that clever. I feel like, without exception, they all caught lightning in a bottle, and they walk around like they invented lightning and the bottle. And yes, and it's infuriating, and it makes me.
And look, it's such a franchise that
boils
they
my
don't have to do
blood.
what CBS does with CSI, where you give another location to it. It's just Shark Tank. It's not the Shark Tank Singapore or Sydney. It's just Shark Tank. It's ubiquitous.
It must
the franchise is so massive.
Yeah, so little to make, and I understand that there is it's a Jungian thing where the Jung said that there's a Cinderella story in every culture, cultures that never intersected, and there's a Shark Tank. It seems in every economy there's a version of that show, the
predator.
dragons, and it's just, and I say in this special, but I want to reiterate this: I would rather be in a Shark Tank than on Shark Tank. I would rather take, because a mako shark or a great white shark will not take as much of your equity when they eat you alive as say the Shark Tank sharks, the Mr. Wonderful.
Laughs and finance. That's what we do here at the Takeout, ladies and gentlemen. So concludes this episode. Stay tuned for the Takeout Outtake Especial. We'll see you next week.
I listened to a Tim Curry Audible version. I watched the Muppet Christmas Carol. I watched the Patrick Stewart version of the Christmas Carol.
Welcome to your Takeout Outtake Especial. The Lambs Club in New York City is our host restaurant. We're deeply grateful to them. Gary Gulman is our special guest. So Gary has been on the show before, so we're not going to do the 3 questions. He's already answered them, but I want to go in a slightly different direction because it is the holiday season. Do you have a favorite holiday movie? And if so, can you tell my audience what it might be?
Muppet Christmas Carol.
Muppet Christmas Carol.
Yeah,
there we go.
I mean, it's just extraordinary. It's funny. It's got the heart of Dickens's. Well, it is Dickens's Christmas Carol, but it has Jim Henson's Muppet creations, and it just. I literally laugh and cry, and I'm so moved. I mean, I have a tradition every year where I consume A Christmas Carol story in at least 5 different forms. Yeah, so I listened to a Tim Curry Audible version. I watched the Muppet Christmas Carol. I watched the Patrick Stewart version of the Christmas Carol, and then I read a book called The Man Who Invented Christmas about writing the Christmas Carol, and then my wife and I are going to see a man, and his name escapes me, but he performs every character in A Christmas Carol on stage at the Soho Playhouse through January 3rd, I think, like that. And we saw it last year, and it's just, I mean, it's breathtaking, astonishing.
One actor
does
everything,
performs, and there seems to be like 18. And I know you're thinking, not Fezziwig. Does he do Fezziwig? Yes, he does Fezziwig. he does all the ghosts and Fezziwig.
And obviously had a horrible childhood.
He had to have, right? Oh my God.
Mommy, look.
Oh yeah, my word. Loneliness, one of the great producers of creativity.
Connect the dots for my audience.
Yes. I say in my
relationship
special,
between your extrovertedness is proportional to your loneliness.
Yeah. To me, I think I would. But I mean, I was thinking about this, and Dickens wrote a book about this, I think, called The Haunted Man, and it's just about how these painful experiences do serve a purpose. They kind of make you who you are. The Wordsworth idea, the child is the father of the man, and it makes you who you are, for better and worse. But there are a lot of great things that come from this. I've been living a dream for a long time because I needed attention. So it's fascinating, and I wonder. The one thing I will say is it could have been easier.
Sure.
I could have been people could have been a little bit more compassionate. The librarian could have been. The librarians in our life could have been a little bit nicer about it. The nature of kids is to lose things, whether it's mittens or hats or coats and library books.
Or teenagers and driver's licenses. I won't go into any more grisly detail about that. But anyway, you mentioned something when we talked in March of 2021 that I want you to repeat for my audience because I found it profound then. I find it profound now. A quote from Samuel Beckett about failing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the problem with this quote is it's been co-opted by tech bros, but...
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
I wanted to use it as the epigraph to my book, but my editor said it's been ruined by guys in frats.
Oh, nice.
Or guys from frats.
Yes.
And so...
Well,
but,
at least tech bros can fall back on their philanthropy because they're so generous. They're not like the robber barons of the Gilded Age who didn't do anything. Public libraries.
Yeah, Andrew Carnegie.
Yeah. No, they don't do anything. Tech bros do nothing.
Yeah, but
and they know it.
Lamborghinis with vanity plates.
But let's excise them from this. But the quote still matters, and it's meaningful to me and to you.
Absolutely. Ever tried, ever failed. Try again, fail better. And there's more to what he said, but that one phrase, fail better, became kind of a mantra to me, and it relieved me of all the pressure of doing well on stage. I just had to try really hard, take some risks, and by doing that, I was successful. It wasn't the outcome. I was tied to the trying, and and challenging myself. And once the audience's response was taken away, it relieved me from having to feel bad the next morning if it didn't go well.
Right.
Yeah. And you can apply that to everything.
Everything and anything. That's the voice of Gary Gulman, our special guest. So concludes our Takeout Outtake Especial. Again, our thanks to the Lambs Club here in Midtown Manhattan. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.